The diner at the end of the universe. The highway was a charcoal ribbon snaking through the desolate wasteland, flanked on both sides by the endless expanse of desert. The sun, a molten penny on the horizon, had started its descent when I spotted the sign, Galaxy Diner, next exit. My stomach grumbled in concert with my old sedan's protestations. It was the solitary beacon promising respite on this forsaken stretch of road. As I pulled into the gravel lot, the diner's silhouette stood stark against the dying light. Its chrome fittings glinted like the edge of a knife, and the neon sign hummed a seductive buzz. Something primal whispered that I should keep driving, but the allure of a warm meal and a strong cup of coffee seduced my better judgment. I opened the diner's door to a tinkling chime and stepped into another era. Checkerboard tiles, vinyl booths in a lurid shade of red, and a jukebox in the corner playing a tune that felt familiar, yet wholly alien. I seated myself at the counter. The waitress drifted over, her smile a shade too bright, her eyes empty as a desert sky. "What'll it be, hon?" "Just coffee and whatever's hot," I replied, my tongue sticking to my dry mouth. The cook, a burly figure in a stained apron, never acknowledged my presence but began to work on my meal. The sizzle of the griddle blended with the soft murmur of conversations from booth I couldn't quite see from my perch. As my coffee arrived, a dark pool in a chipped porcelain mug, it happened. One moment the diner was tranquil, a shrine to long drives and lonely souls. The next, shudders rippled through the room, bending light and shadow into grotesque shapes. I glanced around, expecting panic, but no one stirred. Their faces were serene, as if the fabric of reality hadn't just spasmed before our eyes. With an awkward cough to break the silence, I took a cautious sip. The coffee was unlike anything I'd ever tasted. Each mouthful was memories of places and times I never knew, bitter with longing and sweet with nostalgia. The cook placed a plate in front of me, a simple meal of eggs and bacon, but the aroma was intoxicating, tinged with the scent of far-off spices and the tang of ionized air. As I dug in, the flavor was an umami enigma, delicious but unsettling. When I looked up, I noticed the bizarre dimensions of the place. The distance to the door seemed elongated, impossible given the diner's modest exterior. A vertigo sensation gripped me as the walls seemed to breathe, contracting and expanding gently, rhythmically. "You okay there?" The waitress's voice was a tether back to the booth. Just tired, I think," I lied. She nodded as if she'd heard it 1,000 times. As she walked away, her figure seemed to flicker with each step, as if not quite synced with the room's pulsating walls. Curiosity piqued, I resolved to explore the diner after finishing my meal. Rising, I strolled past my booth and through the nebulous threshold where the counter area homogenized into a living room, somehow simultaneously part of the diner and completely alien. There were travelers lounging on sofas, reading newspapers with cryptic symbols, and speaking in hushed tones that vibrated the air. I turned to head back, to regain my bearings, but the path by which I had come was morphing. The jukebox now played discordant melodies, the tune not so much a sequence of notes, but a writhing of sound. "You shouldn't wander, dear," the waitress said, suddenly at my shoulder. "Why not? What is this place?" She tilted her head, pity or amusement dancing in her otherwise vacant gaze. "You're at a crossroads of sorts. Best stay put and finish your meal." Unnerved, I resumed my seat, but found no solace in the once comforting rattle of dishware and murmur of conversation. A stoic busboy, with eyes like black holes against his pale face, cleared my table, leaving behind just the echoes of his movements. "Where does everyone here come from?" I asked him. He pointed a thin finger upward, not to the ceiling, but beyond, to the cosmos. My head spun with the revelation that this wasn't a stop along the road. It was the road, a junction for the lost travelers of the universe. It explained the eerie staff, the illogical architecture, the food and coffee filled with impossible flavors, and the unaffected patrons. The desire for escape itched at me. I pitched a few crumpled bills onto the counter and bolted for the door. I lunged into the cool evening air, expecting the rough gravel of the parking lot under my feet. Instead, the ground was a void, an abyss that did not end. The diner's facade stretched upwards and outwards, infinity reflected in its windows. The roaring silence of the cosmos engulfed me, my heartbeat a distant drum. Stars and nebulas spiraled around, a cosmic waltz indifferent to my plight. There was no sedan, No road, no signpost to guide me back. A touch on my shoulder, a chill. The waitress stood beside me, shedding the guise of a roadside server to reveal her true ancient form, a tapestry of living constellations, a goddess adorned with the universe. The diner at the end of the universe isn't a place you find on a map, Han. Her voice was the beginning and end of all things. It's where you end up when there's nowhere left to go. Terrified, I looked back at the diner. The door called to me, a doorway back or the path to oblivion. With a hesitant step, I returned to the chasm's edge, the diner behind me, and the endless cosmos before me. Sweat beaded on my brow as I grappled with the inevitable. Step in and join the cosmic flow, or turn back to an existence that defies all reason. Taking a deep breath, I made my choice. The Scent of Lavender. Every night since Marianne passed, the scent of lavender seemed to linger in the hallways of our countryside home. It's just your grief, they'd tell me. Memories play tricks on you. But I knew better. The thing was, we never grew any lavender, never really liked it. I remember mentioning it to Harold, the neighbor, one dull, overcast afternoon. He'd come by with one of his hearty casseroles. Keeps the specter of loneliness at bay, he'd jest, but the laughter never quite reached his eyes. You smell that? I asked as he stepped inside. He sniffed the air, his brow furrowing, then shrugged. Old houses, Greg, they keep scents like secrets. But he shivered, almost imperceptibly. Weeks turned into months, the lavender scent waxing and waning as though it respired with the house. It was on one of those heavy days that the postman, a wiry man named Dennis, hesitated on the doorstep. "Post for you, Greg," he mumbled, a grimace betraying his composed exterior. "The air's thick today. You wearing perfume now?" "No," I replied tersely. "Just the house," I added, more to myself than to him. He nodded, eyes darting to the shadowed corners of the room, speaking volumes with his swift departure. The day Lily, my niece, visited was the day the scent turned oppressive. A boisterous girl, she chattered away, but even her liveliness couldn't ward off the cloying mist of lavender that seemed to coil in every room. She paused. "Uncle Greg, it smells weird, like that perfume Aunt Marianne wore." The room seemed to contract, and for a split second, I saw a glimpse of Marianne in the mirror's reflection. My heart skipped. "Darling, let's have our tea in the garden today," I said, my voice a husky whisper. As spring marched relentlessly toward summer, I increasingly found myself ensnared both by the fragrance and the memories it invoked. Marianne's laughter tinkled in my ears. Her whispers caressed my cheek at night. I'd turn, expecting to find her, but was always greeted by emptiness, until one evening. I was sitting by the fireplace when I heard her voice, "Greg." My blood iced. In the hearth's flickering shadows, she stood before me, resplendent, the lavender scent so potent I could taste it on my tongue. "Why?" was all I could muster, my voice choked with a mix of fear and longing. "The lavender, Greg. It's important." I had to know. After the apparition, I rummaged through Marianne's belongings, her trinkets and books, until I found it, an old diary bound in soft leather. Fingers trembling, I opened to the last entry. "Greg must never know. The scent will protect him. If I can't be there, it will watch over him, keep him from it." Keep me from what? The mystery engulfed me even as the air thickened around me, a lavender-scented shroud. What was Marianne's secret? What needed keeping at bay? I was losing time, days slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. The scent had sunk into the very walls, a permanent resident in the home we once shared. Marianne was everywhere and nowhere, her warning looping in my mind like a broken record. One night, as the moon glared in through the window's gossamer curtains, the perfume grew overwhelming. Choked by the lavender fog, I stumbled outside, gasping for clean air. When I returned, panting, the house was silent, expectant. "You wear the scent too," said a voice. Not Marianne's this time, but darker, rich like soil. I spun to see a figure in the threshold, its outline blurred. Not Marianne, something else. My heart stuttered, the warning finally sinking in. The lavender wasn't just Marianne's essence, it was a guardian, a sentinel warding off something much more insidious that had fixed its gaze upon me. Now I sit, the diary my constant companion, the scent of lavender, a bittersweet solace. I know why she didn't want me to know. Ignorance was my bliss, my safeguard. But her love, even in death, remained my shield. She's still protecting me somehow from whatever lurks just beyond sight. I only hope it's enough. the melancholy of the subway verses. I've always preferred the subway to the chaos of city streets. The rumble of the cars, the periodic lurch as it snakes through darkness. It has a rhythm, a predictability. But those scrawls, the dripping ink of wicked words on once pristine walls, seem to mock that dependable cadence. The first time I noticed the verses was on a dreary Monday. Etched into the carriage's cold steel, I read them with mild amusement. Between the wailing tracks and whispers low, rest-weary souls in transit cursed to go. I thought little of it, attributing the prose to an amateur poet or a troubled soul. It wasn't until the next day, when a new verse greeted me, that the seeds of dread began to sprout. Where smiles falter and time's theft is seen, a ghastly conductor makes his presence keen. By Wednesday, my curiosity became an obsession. Another verse appeared in the same jagged etching. In the serpent's belly, tales of woe are bred. Beware the silent pleas of the dead. I noticed passengers glancing with unease, whispering interpretations like cultists decoding scripture. A gaunt man with hollowed eyes told me the verses spoke of loss and the city's indifference. A young woman nervously posited they predicted the future, with her voice carrying the same levity one might use when reading a daily horoscope. Yet there was fear behind her laughter, a tremble in the air that tensed with each recitation of these creeping words. Thursday brought a chilling development. The verses spoke of an event, a pointed prophecy. Amongst metal echoes, the choked cry will rise. Underneath the moon's watch will be marked for demise. That day, a woman's scream echoed down the line. Panic erupted. Authorities later reported an attempted theft, thankfully thwarted. But the woman's eyes, wild with terror, held mine. She had seen the verse, and in her silence there was a knowing horror, that the recognition of something unseen and malignant, shaping reality. The next verse read as an omen. The serpent coils, its fangs poised to reap. One journey's end is another's eternal sleep. A chill wound around my heart, constricting it with an icy grip. On the platform, a homeless man who often muttered to himself was suddenly articulate. The serpent's words are no man's jest, he rasped. It's a warning. Heed it unless you yearn to meet your rest. The casual nature of my rides transformed into a stage for tragedy, with verses as harbingers. I was no longer a mere onlooker, but a player in an unfolding drama, my role bewilderingly unwritten. Saturday's commute nearly unraveled me. New words cut through the dread. At the end of tunnels, lights do fade. Beware the next stop. Debts must be paid. I was due at a friend's who lived at the line's terminus. As the train whooshed through dark veins of the city, I reconsidered my destination, but curiosity, or perhaps fate, bound me to my seat. Each station we passed, I imagined escaping this metal beast, these ominous walls with their truths and lies. But I stayed, feeling ridiculous for letting specks of ink command my emotions. As my stop approached, the passengers thinned, leaving an eerie silence. Like the herald of doom, the train slowed, a solemn air filling the car. The doors slid open, revealing an empty platform marked with just one more verse. The final verse is writ in shadow's guise, where the lost lament, the end of lies. Stepping onto the platform, the desolation was absolute. The lights flickered, casting gnarled shadows. Echoes haunted the emptiness, and I felt the presence of something unseen, lurking at the edge of my vision. Then, calamity. The lights died, surrounding me in oppressive dark. A sense of finality seized me, a certitude that this act had been written long before I read the first verse. The transient characters, the verses they interpreted, they were all part of this crescendo. My heartbeat thundered, deafening against the stillness. Between the wailing tracks and whispers low, a voice slithered out from the dark, the words magnifying my dread. The unseen voice continued, reciting each verse in mockery of my rising panic. A light flickered back to life, illuminating a figure standing on the opposite platform. The gaunt man from earlier was there, finishing the verses, his eyes locked onto mine, a grim satisfaction etched upon his hollow features. "You've seen it now," he said, each syllable cold and precise. "The verse is complete." Realization crashed over me with suffocating weight. The predictions, the grim events, they had been sealed with each ride, each stop. My ritual reading and the ensemble of characters, they were all integral to bringing these verses to reality. The train moved on without closing its doors, leaving me stranded with the verses, the horrific implications of their completion washing over me. Whether by will or fate, I had become part of the subway's Melancholy, a player in the verse's deadly concerto. And as I stood alone with the now silent prophet on the cold steel tracks, the only certainty was in the finality of the verse's grim prediction. At the end of the tunnel, lights had indeed faded, revealing a truth more horrifying than any imagined ghost or malevolent entity. There was no escaping the verses. They were a dirge for the lost, an indictment of the urban abyss, a prelude, as it seemed, to my own unsettling denouement. The miners of Marrow Hill. I had sworn never to speak of the horrors beneath Marrow Hill, where the earth's gaping maw swallowed men whole, leaving naught but whispered legends and the hollow echo of pickaxes in the night. I was a miner there once, before the weight of the world crushed my spirit along with the tales locked in those pitched tunnels. But time is a thief, pilfering the fortitude that once walled off my fears, and now, spilling forth with the burden of silence, I unravel the tale of Tommy and the heart of darkness that beats beneath us. Tommy was a lad with laughter in his eyes and a carefree jaunt in his step. The contrast to my wary pragmatism was stark. We had been the backbone of Marrow Hill's workforce, each strike of our pickaxes a harmony that played upon the ancient rocks. But as we delved deeper into the gnarled veins of our earth, the air thickened, and the choir of our labor soured into a quiet, foreboding drone. It was on a gloomy Tuesday morning that Tommy knocked on the battered steel of my locker, a grin on his face, waving at the yellowed newspaper clippings he'd pinned inside. "It's just old folk tales, mate," he chuckled. Yet his laugh faltered when the lights flickered, a harbinger of our descent. Within the belly of Marrow Hill, Tommy and I would trade stories to distract ourselves from the tension that crept along the walls like crawling ivy. The legend of the cavernous dwellers, feral beings lost to the sun's grace, was our favorite yarn, although I'd hardly admit it was more than that. Just echoes of our own barks in the dark, I'd say, dismissing our paranoia. But as we tunneled further, the narrow confines of our reality stretched thin, and I felt a presence, foreign yet familiar, a sensation of being watched by hidden eyes. It was the day the earth trembled and the timbered ceilings groaned under their age-old burden that Tommy vanished. Power outages were our demons, casting us into an abyss where even shadows feared to tread. In that shrouded stillness, we awaited restoration of light, but these moments expanded, filling with a taint unseen. When the bulbs blinked their life once more, Tommy's silhouette was absent from the lineup of miners at the exit shaft. Heart pounding in my chest, I retraced our path, calling his name, the sound devoured by the greedy silence of the hollows. What I found, or perhaps what found me, in the twisting veins of that desolate place was a terror unspoken. The walls pulsed, and I felt breath against my nape not gained from human lungs. I chanced upon Tommy's pickaxe, but of him there was no sign, only scratches in the stone that told of a frenzied struggle. Then they came, the dwellers, no longer a mere tale to mock. Their forms were grotesque parodies of our own, eyes smoldering like coals in the gloom. They reached for me with claws honed by the rock, whispering of an age where man was not. Desperate to flee, I scrambled through the choking tunnels, the boundary between reality and madness reduced to dust. Behind me, the screeches echoed, a cacophony of ancient hate. I emerged into daylight, gasping, the sun's warmth unable to thaw the chill set in my bones. There was an investigation, of course, but no trace of Tommy was unearthed. They sealed Marrow Hill, deeming it structurally unsound, and with it, they buried the evidence of the nightmares therein. Or so they thought. Years passed, the green hills of the world outside striving to erase the scars left in our mining town. Whispers of Tommy's fate dulled to hushed wonder, but peace was a stranger to me. Sleep eluded my grasp, for each night I'd hear the faint tapping from beneath the earth, a cruel reminder that my account held stories untold, the mistakes of dead men marking the beat. And so I took my eternal post, a sentinel bound by guilt and morbid obligation, atop Marrow Hill. Lantern by my side, I'd thumb the old newspaper clippings, black and white images of the proud miners we'd been, staring back at time's unfathomable gulf. Then, always persistent, the tapping would begin anew, a ghostly rhythm beneath me. My hands would quiver, age-stricken not by years, but by the relics of terror, the calloused fingers once again, yearning for the heft of a pickaxe handle. If you pass by Marrow Hill, they say you might still hear the sound of my toiling below, though I linger here on watch, a husk adorned in regret. My tale ends not with escape nor redemption, but with the inexorable pull of the dread below. It is the land itself that beckons, its voice inseparable from the madness within. So heed my warning, for those who tread too close might find themselves ensnared by the echoes of Tommy's last refrain, swallowed by the abyss, as I once was, as all of Marrow Hill is, forevermore. The humming in the walls, I thought it was a steal when I snagged the place at Larkspur Heights. A modern building, all glistening glass and steel, rising into the sky like a beacon of the good life I had always dreamt of. But soon after moving in, that dream fractured. It began the first night as I lay in the grasp of a restless slumber, a low, inexplicable humming in the walls. At first, I reasoned it away as the quirks of modern living, the hum of a neighbor's late-night laundry cycle, or the reverberation of far-off urban life. By the fourth sleepless night, these rationalizations turned brittle. I contacted the building management, who offered polite shrugs and insincere promises to look into it, but nothing changed. The hum persisted, threading its drone through my waking hours. Driven to distraction, I began a methodical search of Larkspur Heights. Perhaps, I thought, if I found the source, I could silence it and reclaim my peace. I started on my floor, wandering the perfectly identical corridors, their hushed carpet and polished doors revealing nothing. As days passed, I roamed higher and lower into the building, drawn by the hum's siren call. It was a soundscape transformed. The once tranquil humming escalated, developing an urgency that echoed within the hollow of my chest. The corridors twisted stranger with each passing threshold. No longer the sleek lines of design I remembered, but something older, a labyrinth of eroded stone and withered wood, whispering with the ghost of forgotten memories. And still, there was no one. Lobby, gym, laundry, each communal haunt was as abandoned as the long, winding hallways. It was as if the building exhaled its tenants, leaving only me to face what it harbored within its syncopated beat. The lights flickered, casting peculiar shadows that danced to the rhythm of my pulse, quickened now as I mapped a territory that no longer felt my own. There was a feeling, suffocating and omnipresent, that the humming wanted me to find it. With each new floor explored, the sound's texture thickened, acquiring whispers and moans, as if the voices of the building itself were sewn into the monotonous drone. It clawed within my skull, an intimate intruder, prying into the marrow of my sanity. By the time I acknowledged that the building had changed, it was too late. The sterile, numbered floors gave way to an arithmetic of madness. 12, 13, 14. They turned meaningless when every door led to a replicated corridor of warped echoes and the same eerie hum, now so close it seemed to breathe down my neck. I was within the heart of Larkspur Heights, and it was alive. The revelation spun before my eyes. It had been inside me all along. The humming, not a quirk or an appliance, but a fragment of my own splintered mind, reverberating off the walls. I was the source and the receiver. The building's endless paths were hallways of my own consciousness, each door a sealed compartment of memory and thought I could no longer differentiate. The walls thrummed with a frequency that matched my racing heart. My breath was lost in the undulating pitch that filled the space, as if the very air was made of the sound itself. The conclusion clawed at me with chilling clarity. There was no escape from the humming because there was nothing to escape from but my unraveling psyche. I couldn't tell you when I last saw the sun or the crisp lines of Larkspur Heights. I'm somewhere in the walls now, navigating eternally in the hum. It's everything, a lullaby and a dirge I compose with my every fractured thought. The sound is me, and I am the sound, and we are the building itself, a monument to a mind undone. The Puppet Show at Midnight. March 3rd. I arrived in this old European city a week ago, and already its cobbled streets and towering cathedrals whisper to me secrets of a time long past. But nothing caught my fancy quite like the puppet show that materializes in the town square each midnight. It's a magnetic, almost hypnotic affair that has me writing now, in the dim light of my rented room, unable to push away the unnerving feelings it stirs. March 4th. The puppet show at midnight is unlike any I've seen before. The puppeteer, a gaunt silhouette against the flickering backdrop of torches, controls the marionettes with a grace that suggests something more than mere strings. The puppets dance and act out tales of love and loss, their movements so lifelike, I sometimes forget they're carved from wood. The townsfolk watch in silence, shadows with wide eyes, whispering among themselves when they think no one listens. They speak of the puppeteer as if he's more phantom than flesh. March 9th. Each night, as the bell tower announces the witching hour, I find myself among the crowd, drawn by an invisible thread. Something about the puppeteer's power feels off. It's as if he pulls at more than just wooden limbs. A disturbing notion, but I cannot prove it, yet. Last night, however, one of the puppets, a tragic, porcelain-faced ballerina, stumbled during her performance. The gasp that sliced through the audience chilled me to the bone, as though her misstep was an omen. March 11th, I ventured to engage some of the locals in earnest conversation about the puppeteer today. They met my questions with averted gazes and hushed tones, suggesting that some truths are best left unspoken. "He's been here as long as the square itself," an old woman whispered, her eyes darting to the empty stage. "And some say he'll be here long after we're all gone." Her cryptic words leave me uneasy, yet even more determined to unravel the mystery. March 14th, I've taken to watching the puppeteer closely, noting how his fingers caress the air, weaving a tapestry of shadows and fate. Last night, I caught his eye, or I believe I did, for they are pits of darkness that see everything and nothing. A cold shiver ran down my spine, and for a moment I felt as if strings tugged at my very soul. March 16th, the show's macabre nature grows with each midnight. The tales are darker, filled with horrors and twisted endings that leave the crowd murmuring in distress. Yet, we all return, night after night. I noticed this evening the whispers among the townsfolk had taken on a feverish pitch. A few glared up at their windows, as if fearing something they couldn't yet articulate. Have they, too, sensed the puppeteer's unseen influence? March 18th, sleep eludes me. I've started to dream of marionettes, their hollow eyes burrowing into mine, accusing me of what? I'm not sure. It feels like I'm losing pieces of myself, the string of days blurring together. More disconcerting are moments when my limbs seem to move with a mind of their own, reaching for objects, pausing midair as if pulled by unseen force. March 19th, tonight I shall confront the puppeteer, rid myself of these waking nightmares. And so, I leave this diary open, a testament should I not return. Is it madness to believe I've become like one of his puppets, controlled by the same sorcery used to animate lifeless wood? The square is silent as I approach the stage. I'm early, the puppeteer still shrouded in preparation. The moment has come. "Who are you?" I ask, my voice stronger than I feel. The puppeteer turns, and I realize he is ageless, his visage carved from the same darkness as the night sky. "An artisan of fate," he replies, voice a melody of chaos and calm. "I want out," I demand. "Release me." A smile flickers across his shadowed face. "But you are the star of tonight's performance," he says, gesturing to the empty strings that now, impossibly, dangle before me. I stare in horror, the realization crashing into me like a wave. I am not a spectator. I've been a part of the act all along, dancing to his tune. How long has he been maneuvering me? Does my diary contain my own words, or have they been scripted? The townsfolk begin to fill the square, their faces pale in anticipation or fear. I reach up, grabbing at the strings, but they evade my fingers, as though they are ethereal, a metaphor made manifest. "Play your part," the puppeteer commands, and my body lurches forward. It's no use. He's had me since the moment I first laid eyes on the stage. As I'm forced to ascend the steps, something deep within me rebels. I seize a string, finally, and pull with all my might. The strand snaps, and the puppeteer's masked displeasure is the last thing I see before an all-consuming darkness envelops me. When I awake, the diary on my nightstand is closed, but my hands feel wooden, my mind dazed. The puppet show at midnight will no longer need me. My performance has ended. I collect my few belongings, leaving behind the whispers and marionettes and a tale that will haunt me until my days are done. I suspect, no matter how far I flee or how vigorously I deny it, come the next midnight, I'll feel the tug, the inexorable pull of strings that never truly let go. But for now, as dawn breaks, I still have the strength to walk away, to try and outpace the echo of puppet feet dancing in the dark, the silent applause of a captive audience, and the ghostly smirk of a puppeteer who forever holds the strings. The end. The reflection in the waterwheel. I had always been drawn to the remnants of the past, decaying silently amidst the relentless march of time. Long forgotten stories whispered through the shards of their existence, and my camera was the medium through which they spoke. Thus, one overcast morning found me in a rural village, where an old watermill, its giant wheel motionless and covered in ivy, promised a perfect subject for my lens. As the first photograph clicked into existence, I noticed a peculiarity, a reflection in the pond below the water wheel where none should have been. In the water's murky surface, amongst the ripples, was the outline of a person. I peered over the edge, expecting to see someone behind me, but there was only solitude and the soft murmur of the wind. Incidents of the past were often just family lore discussed over dinner, but in this village, the mill's tale was one shrouded in hushed tones. The locals spoke of a tragedy long ago when the miller's wife met an end as mysterious as it was tragic, beside the water wheel she so loved. Each day I returned, compelled by an itch in my soul, my camera seizing moment after moment. Each snapshot revealed more of the figure, growing clearer, more defined. I could make out the dress, the sorrow in the stance, the echo of despair around where the eyes should be. "That's old Millie," an elderly man said later at a village pub, recognizing her attire in one of my photographs. "Drowned herself, she did, after her daughter vanished into the river. Never been right, that mill, ever since." A pall seemed to hover over the village, and unease blossomed within me. I could not shake the reflection from my thoughts, nor the sense that the story was incomplete. Curious and foolhardy, I ventured back at night, the water wheel looming like a cyclopean beast against the starless sky. I took a photograph, the flash briefly illuminating my surroundings. In the water's mirror, the reflection was no longer alone. Beside Millie stood a small child, her hand in the mother's grasp. Both figures were staring directly at me, through the lens, through the veneer of time. My heart froze, and the camera slipped from my numb fingers. "Millie wants her daughter," a voice whispered, as though the wind carried words. Morning seemed an eternity away as I retrieved my camera, my fingers trembling. The dawn revealed no figures in the water, but the sense of a lingering presence remained palpable. The villagers avoided the mill, and now I understood why. It was a place caught between worlds, where the veil was thin and the grieving spirits walked. Consumed with the need for answers, I scoured the local archives. A heartbreaking entry unveiled the truth. Millie's daughter had disappeared the very night I was born, a date confirmed by a tattered clipping of my own birth announcement found tucked within the pages of the village's history. A chill ran through me as puzzle pieces locked into place, forming a picture I dared not contemplate. The last of my courage gathered like the heavy clouds above. I stood by the water wheel, my camera poised one final time. The reflection awaited, clearer than ever, an ethereal accusation in their stillness. "Take me to her," I whispered to the reflection, my voice nothing but a quivering thread in the vast tapestry of the night. The water consumed me with frigid arms. Below the surface, the world was silent, save for the slow beating of a heart, my heart or another's, I could not tell. Then, she was there before me, Millie, no specter now, but achingly, terrifyingly real. "Take her place," she wept, pushing me toward a light I hadn't seen before, a light that bore the essence of home, of beginnings. Suddenly, I was on the bank, gasping, drenched, the weight of centuries lifted from my chest. Around my neck, my camera hung heavy with a roll of used film. The images revealed no reflection. Instead, there was a newborn in the arms of a tearful mother with no family resemblance. Behind her, the spectral outline of a woman, her sadness replaced with release. Millie had claimed her daughter from the land of the living, and I had been her unwary vessel, born of her grief, and allowed to live a borrowed life. Now I understood why ruins called to me. I had been one myself, a living monument to a mother's love that defied even death itself. The greenhouse of the night. I should have known by the curling ivy that embraced the stone walls of the manor with such fervor that the place itself was a creature of voracious appetites. But when the opportunity arose to tend the exotic flora within the manor's legendary greenhouse, My excitement eclipsed more sensible misgivings. My first day, the air was thick with the scent of earth and growth. They warned me of the greenhouse's oppressive heat, but nothing could have prepared me for the way it seemed to wrap around me, a living, breathing entity. The lush vibrancy of the plant life was extraordinary. Emerald leaves unfurled towards the glass ceiling, vivid flowers pulsed with an inner light, and tendrils snaked toward unseen sources of nourishment. I found the energy invigorating, even as sweat purled on my brow. By week's end, my initial enthusiasm had begun to wane. The heat was unrelenting, and the shimmering air seemed to whisper in tongues that skimmed the edge of understanding. I would wake in the middle of the night, skin tingling with the lingering touch of the greenhouse's sweltering embrace. Shadows of leaves danced upon the walls of my quarters, even when stillness ruled the night. Curiosity, no, obsession, led me to the greenhouse under the cloak of darkness. The plants, which seemed merely vibrant by day, were transformed. They hummed with an eerie resonance that resonated deep in my chest. Though I knew it to be folly, I leaned in to listen, and in the pallor of moonlight, I could swear I heard them calling, whispering for something, yearning. My days and nights blurred. The manor's proprietor, a reclusive figure with sharp eyes, inquired as to the health of his prized collection. I spoke of their extraordinary growth, which seemed to please him, though he never ventured into the greenhouse himself. The plants grew bolder, their whispers morphing into a chant I could almost understand. Pushing through dense foliage, I would find remnants of small creatures. A bird stripped of feathers, a mouse devoid of flesh. I convinced myself these were simply the outcomes of a balanced ecosystem. One night, after weeks of labor amidst the choking verdure, a deafening and guttural cry echoed from the center of the greenhouse. I scrambled over the entwined floor, my flashlight beam careening off the moist leaves until it settled on something that made my blood run cold. A new plant, unlike any other, unfurling not leaves, but what appeared to be thin, nearly translucent fingers. I should have fled, but my feet were rooted to the spot. As I watched, the grotesque plant writhed, contracting around an unseen form. I listened to the wet sounds of digestion, a morbid fascination pinning me to the ground until the plant relaxed, the eerie fingers drooping with satisfaction. I stumbled back to the manor, wild-eyed and gasping. The proprietor met me in the foyer, his face an unreadable mask. He spoke of the greenhouse as one would a cherished pet. She is hungry, you see, always so hungry. Sweat from the greenhouse still slick upon my skin, I recoiled from him, from the horror of realization. The job was not to tend to the plants, it was to feed them. Now I pass the days with trembling anticipation, knowing each night I fulfill the unspoken pact. The whispers are clearer, urging me to find more, always more. The morbid bloom in the greenhouse's heart has grown insatiable, and the manor's remote location provides little opportunity for questions, for chance visitors. In a last act of defiance, or perhaps madness, I pen this tale, weaving my warning within it. This manuscript will be my lure, the absolute truth masked as fiction. The next caretaker must know yet will be drawn in, as I was, by the greenhouse of the night. If you are reading this, heed my words. Yet I can't shake the dread that deep down I am merely fulfilling my final duty to feed her once more.